Now, this chart is an overview of the main sources of government assistance that is available to students. I'm going to go through this with you, but I don't want you to worry about having to memorize or really learn deeply this chart or how it is that a financial aid administrator would determine your eligibility. I think it's good and helpful for folks to understand how these programs work, but it's the financial aid administrator's job to review your circumstances and then figure out which of these things you qualify for in an academic year and how much. So in the first line there, we have the federal Pell Grant. The source of those funds, the Pell Grant, is the federal government. It's the best kind of financial aid a student can receive. It's that gift type of financial aid. The annual maximum changes each year. It's roughly about $7,400 is the most a student could receive in 1 year. It is based on something called the Student Aid Index, or SAI. It's dependent upon the student's family's financial and household situation. So what kind of income and assets and what size is the family, etc. That's all of that information is put together to determine your SAI, and that index tells the government and the financial aid administrator how much, if anything, you qualify for in the federal Pell Grant. In addition to the federal Pell Grant, if you are a New York State student who will be attending a New York State college, you might qualify for the TAP grant. That stands for the Tuition Assistance Program. It is from New York State. It is only available to New York State residents going to New York State colleges, but it is a gift aid. It's a grant. It's, again, the best kind of financial aid that a student can receive. The most a student can receive in one academic year is $5,565. And for this program, it's based on the family's New York net taxable income. So that figure has to be less than $80,000 in order for the student to get any TAP grant from New York State. In order to get the maximum TAP grant, the New York net taxable income would have to be less than $7,000, just to give you an idea. So it's prorated depending upon the family's New York State net taxable income. The student has to be enrolled full-time as well in order to qualify for New York State TAP. In addition to those two grants, there are federal student loans. There's the federal subsidized student loan. The source of those funds is the federal government. And that loan is in the student's name. It's entirely in the student's name. The parents do not co-sign or sign for this loan whatsoever. The most a first-year student can receive in the federal subsidized student loan is $3,500. And the eligibility criteria for this is based on the student's financial need, and they have to be enrolled at least half-time. Subsidized means that the government is paying the interest on that student loan for the student for the entire time they're enrolled at least half-time. There is also an unsubsidized federal student loan. Again, the source of those funds is the federal government. The student is the borrower, and the most the student can receive in addition to the subsidized loan for their first year is $2,000. For this one, there is no financial need criteria, but the student does have to be enrolled at least half-time. You've probably guessed that if subsidized means the government pays the interest on that type of student loan for a student, then unsubsidized would mean the interest is accruing on that type of student loan while the student's enrolled. And that would be true if that's what you're guessing. There is no payment required for either type of these student loans. So no payment has to be made while the student's enrolled at least half-time. And there's a 6-month grace period after the student graduates or drops below half-time before repayment begins. The standard repayment term on these loans is 10 years, but there's all sorts of a variety of types of repayment terms now that extend beyond the standard 10 years for students who need it, who need to extend the time and lower the monthly payment to make it affordable for them. The interest rate is a fixed rate. It does change, or it can change from year to year, depending on how interest rates are trending. So it's based on the Treasury bill rate, and the interest rate right now is right around 5%. But whatever it is, and that rate is determined around May of each year for the following year, whatever that is the fixed rate for the life of the loan. In addition to those two student loans, the government makes a parent loan available. It's called PLUS, and that stands for Parent Loan for Undergraduate Students. The parent in this case would be the borrower, not the student. And the parent can borrow up to, it says COA, which stands for Cost of Attendance. That's the all-inclusive costs, not just direct costs like tuition fees, and if you're living on campus, your room and food or meal plan, but it includes things like estimates for books and supplies and travel and personal expenses while the student's at college. So the government allows this money to be lent from the government to parents to help them finance their son or daughter's educational expenses. The eligibility criteria on this one is that the parent who's borrowing must have a clear credit history. So it's not based on your credit score or debt to income ratio. It's actually based on credit history. So they're going to be looking at a parent who's trying to borrow this loan. The government does a credit check. They're going to be looking at, are there any recent bankruptcies? That's the kind of thing that can affect whether a parent can borrow this federal parent loan. If a parent is denied the federal parent loan based on their credit, that allows the financial aid office actually to increase the federal unsubsidized student loan for a student by up to another $4,000 or $5,000, depending on that student's academic year in school. The federal parent loan also is a fixed rate loan. The rate is higher on the federal parent loan than on the student loan. It's closer to 8%. And the standard repayment term is also 10 years on the federal parent loan. No payment, though, needs to be made while the student's enrolled for the first 4 years. Though if you don't make any payment, interest is accruing on that student loan while the student's in school during the 4 years. In addition to those loans and those grants, the federal government makes funds available for work study. And that's that part-time job that a student can have on campus. It's generally around $2,500, but it is the dollar amount is determined by each college. It is partially funded by the federal government and partially funded by the colleges. And the eligibility criteria for this is based on the student's financial need in addition to what the school policy is. And school policy comes into play on this one because colleges are given a lump sum of money for this particular program to distribute to its students, and it's never enough, frankly. And so colleges have to determine policies, who's going to get it, what financial need range, what class years, et cetera. So they develop their own policies, so it can vary a bit from school to school, unlike the standard policies for the other programs.